It all started with a lie, as these things always do. A simple, plausible lie wrapped in the promise of female bonding and overpriced spa treatments. She called it her girls' trip, a weekend getaway with friends she swore she needed. I even packed her bag, kissing her goodbye with the practiced ease of a man who believed he was in a happy 20-year marriage. But a nagging feeling, a cold knot in my gut, led me to her car just hours later, and that's when I saw it. The GPS history, a glowing digital trail leading not to a mountain spa, but to a downtown address I didn't recognize. My world didn't just crack, it atomized. You think you know how this story ends: a screaming match, a messy divorce, a man left broken. Think again. What I uncovered next and what I did about it changed everything. Before diving in, hit that subscribe button and comment below. Have you ever dealt with betrayal? Let's hear your stories. Part 1: The Fading Glow. The silence in our house had become a language of its own. It wasn't an empty silence, it was heavy, filled with unspoken words and the ghosts of laughter from years past. At 48, I'd built a life I was proud of, brick by literal brick. My construction company, started from the back of a beat-up pickup truck, now supported a dozen families. It had paid for our sprawling suburban home, for our son Ethan's college tuition, and for the comfortable life my wife, Sarah, had grown accustomed to. For 20 years, she was my partner, my anchor, the woman whose smile could make the hardest day feel worthwhile. But lately, that smile had become a rare currency. The strain hadn't appeared overnight. It was a slow fade, like a photograph left in the sun. It started with small things. She'd stop asking about my day, her eyes glazing over when I talked about blueprints or zoning permits. Her focus shifted inward, toward a world I wasn't invited into, a world of new friends from her yoga studio, of whispered phone calls she'd take in the other room, of a sudden, almost frantic obsession with her appearance. "It's for me, Mark," she'd say, a defensive edge to her voice when I commented on the new designer clothes or the expensive highlights in her hair. Is it a crime for a woman to want to feel good about herself? Of course not. I encouraged it. I loved seeing her happy, confident. I was the guy who'd brag to my buddies about my beautiful wife, but this felt different. It wasn't about confidence, it felt like a costume she was putting on for a play I hadn't been given the script for. Our intimacy, once a warm and easy fire, had dwindled to embers. My touch, which used to elicit a contented sigh, now often caused her to flinch, as if startled. She'd cite headaches, exhaustion from her Pilates class, or an early morning meeting for the charity board she'd recently joined. I was a hardworking man, not a fool, but I was a husband who wanted to believe, so I accepted the excuses. I told myself it was a phase, a midlife recalibration for us both. I poured myself another glass of bourbon at night and focused on the company, the one thing I still felt I had control over. The girls' trip was her idea, announced with a forced brightness that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Mandy and Chloe and I are going to that new spa resort up by Bear Mountain," she'd explained over dinner a few weeks ago. "Just a weekend to recharge our batteries. You don't mind, do you?" "Mind, Sarah, of course not," I said, genuinely trying to be supportive. "You deserve it, you've been so stressed lately." The irony was thicker than the steak on my plate. She was stressed. I was juggling a multi-million-dollar project with a city inspector who seemed to have a personal vendetta against me, all while trying to figure out why the woman I loved looked at me like I was a stranger. But I smiled, played the part of the understanding husband, and said, "It'll be good for you." That Friday, the performance continued. I helped her carry her ridiculously oversized suitcase to her Lexus SUV in the driveway. She was wearing a new silk blouse and jeans that looked like they cost more than my first car. A faint, unfamiliar perfume, something floral and exotic, not her usual light, clean scent, clung to her. "You smell nice," I said, trying to pull her close. She gave me a quick, stiff hug, her body tense. "Thanks, it's new." She didn't elaborate, she never did anymore. "Drive safe, okay? Text me when you get there." "Of course," she said, already sliding into the driver's seat, her eyes hidden behind a pair of large designer sunglasses. "Love you." The words sounded rehearsed, a line delivered out of habit. "Love you too," I replied to the closing door. I stood in the driveway, a forgotten prop, and watched as her car disappeared down the street, leaving behind only the lingering scent of her new perfume and the heavy, familiar silence. Part 2: The Digital Breadcrumb. I spent the next few hours trying to shake the unease. I threw myself into work, reviewing schematics and answering emails, but my focus was shot. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart leaped, hoping it was her. A text, a picture of the spa, anything to prove the cold dread in my stomach was just paranoia. But nothing came. Around noon, I gave up. The house was too quiet, too big. I decided to do something productive, something to make her return a little sweeter. Her car had been complaining about low tire pressure, and I knew she'd been meaning to get it detailed. I figured I could handle both. A small, loving gesture, the kind of thing I used to do all the time. Her spare key was on the hook by the door. I grabbed it and headed out to the garage. The Lexus was her sanctuary, always immaculate. But as I opened the passenger door to check the glove box for the tire pressure gauge, a small, glittery earring caught my eye, half hidden under the floor mat. It wasn't hers. Sarah preferred simple, elegant studs. This was a cheap, gaudy thing, something a teenager might wear. I picked it up, a piece of evidence from a crime I couldn't yet name, and dropped it into my pocket. My unease sharpened into genuine suspicion. I topped off the tires, my movements mechanical, my mind racing. Who had been in her car? When? My thoughts were a chaotic storm. I told myself there were a million rational explanations. Maybe she gave one of her new friends a ride. Maybe it belonged to the daughter of someone on her charity board, but my gut wasn't buying it. I decided to clean the interior myself. As I wiped down the dashboard, my hand brushed against the large touchscreen of the navigation system. It was still on, displaying the map of our quiet suburban neighborhood. On a whim, driven by a force I didn't understand, I tapped the menu button. Then I hit recent destinations. My blood ran cold. The top of the list wasn't Bear Mountain Spa and Resort. It wasn't even close. The most recent address, entered just this morning, was 1412 Astor Street. It was a downtown address in a trendy, expensive part of the city known for its luxury high-rise condos and boutique hotels. I knew the area well. One of my biggest projects was just a few blocks from there. My heart started hammering against my ribs. It had to be a mistake. Maybe she was picking up one of her friends there. I scrolled down the list. The same address, 1412 Astor Street, appeared again and again, twice last week. 3 times the week before. It was a recurring destination, a regular stop on a secret itinerary. My hands were shaking. I pulled out my phone, my fingers fumbling as I typed the address into a search engine. The result popped up instantly: the Argent, luxury residences and suites. It was a hybrid building, absurdly expensive condos on the upper floors and a high-end boutique hotel on the lower ones, the world tilted on its axis. The girl's trip, the new perfume, the distant behavior, the whispered phone calls, the cheap earring. It wasn't a series of disconnected events, it was a pattern, a story, and I was the fool who hadn't been reading the pages. She wasn't at a spa nestled in the mountains with her friends. She was less than 30 miles away, in a luxury hotel with someone else. The air in the garage suddenly felt thin, suffocating. I stumbled out into the bright afternoon sun, gasping for breath. The pain was physical, a white-hot spear twisting in my chest. 20 years. 20 years of trust, of shared history, of building a life together, all shattered by a single tap on a screen. The loving husband was gone, replaced by a man staring into an abyss. And from the bottom of that abyss, something cold and hard began to rise. Rage, Part 3, the anatomy of a lie. I didn't confront her, not yet. The initial shock was too profound, the pain too raw. Instead, I retreated into my office, the digital breadcrumb from the GPS burning a hole in my mind. 1412 Astor Street, the Argent. It played on a loop, a mantra of betrayal. My first instinct was primal. I wanted to drive there, to kick down the door of whatever suite she was in, and see the truth for myself. I pictured the scene with cinematic clarity, the rumpled sheets, the discarded clothes, the look of shock on her face, the anonymous man beside her. I wanted to scream, to break things, to unleash the hurricane of fury building inside me. But a different voice, a colder, more calculating part of me held me back. What would that accomplish? It would give her control. She could twist the narrative, paint me as the crazy, jealous husband. She would cry, deny, gaslight me until I doubted my own sanity. I'd seen it happen to friends. The cheater, when cornered, becomes the victim. No, if I was going to do this, I needed more than a suspicion and a GPS history. I needed undeniable, soul-crushing proof. My mind, accustomed to solving logistical puzzles and managing complex construction projects, shifted gears. The betrayal was now a problem to be solved and structure to be deconstructed. The target was no longer reconciliation, it was truth. And after the truth, justice. I spent the rest of Friday in a fugue state, a ghost in my own home. Every object seemed to mock me. The wedding photo on the mantel, two smiling, ridiculously young people who thought they had it all figured out. The soft throw blanket on the couch where we used to cuddle and watch movies. The empty space on her side of the bed. Each memory was now tainted, a scene from a life that was a lie. I started digging. It was disturbingly easy. We had a family phone plan, a shared credit card account. For 20 years, these were symbols of our unity, our partnership. Now they were my tools. I logged into the credit card portal. My eyes scanned the list of recent transactions, searching for anything out of place, and there it was. Weekly charges from a high-end restaurant downtown, La Vigne, always on a Tuesday or Thursday afternoon. Lunch for two. I'd been working late on those days, trying to close the deal on the new municipal contract. I'd call her and she'd say she was at her book club or a charity meeting. Then I found the hotel charges. Not for the Argent, he must have paid for that, but for other places. A weekend retreat in Napa a few months back that she'd also claimed was a trip with her friend Chloe. I remembered that weekend. I'd been home with a nasty case of the flu, and she'd sounded so concerned over the phone, her voice dripping with sympathy while she was likely in bed with another man. The coldness of the deception was breathtaking. The final piece clicked into place when I logged into our phone records. A single number appeared over and over. Dozens of calls, hundreds of texts, always during the day when I was at work. The calls were long, sometimes over an hour. The sheer volume of communication was staggering. It wasn't a casual fling. This was a relationship, a whole secret life running in parallel to ours. I didn't recognize the number, so I did what any man in my position in the 21st century would do. I typed it into a social media search bar. His name was Julian Croft. His profile picture showed a man in his late 30s with perfectly coiffed hair, a blindingly white smile, and the kind of toned, lean body that spoke of hours in the gym. His bio read, life coach and empowerment guru. Helping you unlock your authentic self. His feed was an insufferable collection of inspirational quotes overlaid on pictures of sunsets, photos of him doing yoga on a paddleboard, and selfies of him drinking green juice. He was a walking, talking cliché, the kind of guy I'd openly mock with my friends, and he was sleeping with my wife. A wave of nausea and something akin to dark, hysterical laughter washed over me. Sarah, my pragmatic, down-to-earth Sarah, had fallen for this self-important charlatan. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was an insult to my intelligence. She hadn't just replaced me, she'd replaced me with a human Instagram filter. This wasn't about passion, this was about a midlife crisis cliché of the highest order. She felt unseen by her hardworking, dependable husband, so she ran to the arms of a man who sold authenticity as a brand. That evening she called. Her voice was light, breezy, full of the details of her fictional day. The massage was incredible, Mark. You would have loved it. Chloe says hi. We're just having a glass of wine before dinner. I leaned back in my leather office chair, the phone records glowing on the monitor in front of me. I played my part. Sounds amazing, honey. I'm glad you're having a good time. You deserve it. The words felt like acid in my mouth. How was your day? She asked, the question a hollow formality. Quiet, I said, the word hanging in the air between us, pregnant with a truth she couldn't begin to imagine. Just a quiet day at home. Part 4, a ghost in my own home. Sarah came home on Sunday evening, right on schedule. She walked in carrying a small bag from a spa gift shop, a prop for her stage play, and wearing a mask of serene relaxation. She even smelled of lavender and eucalyptus, a scent she must have sprayed on herself in the car to complete the illusion. I feel like a new woman, she announced, dropping her keys on the counter. She came over to kiss me, but I turned my head slightly so her lips landed on my cheek. It felt like being kissed by a viper. Welcome home, I said, my voice carefully neutral. Did you have a good time? The best, she sighed, launching into a detailed, well-rehearsed monologue about the hot stone massage, the terrible celebrity gossip she and Chloe had shared in the sauna, and the delicious but overpriced avocado toast they'd had for brunch. She was a phenomenal liar, detailed, confident, and completely convincing. A small, morbid part of me was almost impressed. Living with her for the next 2 weeks was the hardest thing I'd ever done. I became an actor in my own life, playing the part of the slightly oblivious, hardworking husband she thought she knew. I went to work, I came home, I asked about her day. I listened to her talk about her charity meetings and yoga classes, all the while knowing they were code for her trysts with Julian, the empowerment guru. The house became a minefield of memories. Every room held a story, and now every story was a lie. I'd look at her across the dinner table, the woman I had built a life with, the mother of my son, and I would feel a dizzying cocktail of emotions. There was still a deep, aching love for the woman I thought she was, a phantom limb of an emotion that I couldn't just sever. But it was tangled with a cold, hard rage that was growing stronger every day. And beneath it all was a profound, soul-crushing sadness. I felt like a ghost haunting the periphery of my own existence. I was there, but I wasn't. The real me was locked away, watching, gathering evidence and planning. The dark humor of the situation wasn't lost on me. She thought she was the one with the secret, the one living a thrilling double life, but I was the one with the real power now. I knew the truth. She was just living in the carefully constructed reality I allowed her to see. My internal debates were torturous. One moment I'd be replaying 20 years of happy memories, Ethan's birth, our first home, a trip to Italy where we'd renewed our vows. Was I really going to throw all of that away? Could we fix this? A small, desperate part of me wondered if I could just confront her, if we could go to therapy, if the woman I loved was still in there somewhere, buried beneath the lies and tea. The affair with the yoga instructor. This was the vulnerable side of me, the side that could bring a female audience to a point of empathy to see the man behind the anger. But then, the other side would take over. The man who had worked his fingers to the bone to give her everything, the man who had trusted her implicitly, that man was screaming for justice. He saw her lies not as a cry for help, but as the ultimate act of disrespect. Forgiveness felt like an act of self-mutilation. Revenge, on the other hand, revenge felt like salvation. It felt like taking back control. It was this strategic resolve that would resonate with the male audience, the desire to not be a victim, but the master of his own fate. I continued my investigation with a quiet, methodical precision. I installed a keylogger on the family computer. I purchased a small, audio-activated recorder, which I tucked under the passenger seat of her car. Every piece of data I collected was another nail in the coffin of our marriage. The emails, the text messages, they were nauseatingly cliché, full of breathless prose about their deep connection and how he saw the real her. They complained about me, of course. I was clueless, unemotional, more married to my work than to her. According to them, I was the reason she had no choice but to seek solace in the arms of a life coach who charged $300 an hour to tell people to live their truth. The hypocrisy was galling. My work had paid for the car she drove to meet him, the phone she used to text him, and the very house she was betraying me in. The anger burned away the sadness, leaving something sharp and clear in its wake. My path was set. I wasn't just going to expose her. I was going to dismantle her entire fabricated world. Part 5, The Unraveling. The first crack in Sarah's composure appeared about a week after her trip. I had become a master of subtle psychological warfare. It started with small things. I began using words Julian had used in his texts to her, weaving them into our conversation. "I was thinking," I said one evening as she was scrolling through her phone, probably texting him, "we really need to be more intentional about our time together. We need to connect on a more authentic level." She looked up from her phone, her eyes wide with a flicker of panic before she masked it. "Oh, yeah, that's a nice thought, Mark." I also accidentally left a brochure for the Argent Hotel on the kitchen counter, mixed in with the mail. "Some junk mail," I said, watching her out of the corner of my eye. I saw her hand hesitate over it, her face paling slightly before she swept it into the recycling bin with a little too much force. She was getting nervous. My quiet, predictable routine had been disrupted. I was no longer the oblivious husband. I was present, watchful, and using her lover's own vapid vocabulary against her. She started hiding her phone more, taking calls outside, and jumping every time I walked into a room unexpectedly. The hunter was becoming the hunted, and she could feel the net tightening. Her defiance came out as aggression towards me. She started picking fights over trivial things, the way I loaded the dishwasher, a bill I'd forgotten to pay, my work boots left by the back door. "Can't you just do one thing right?" she snapped one night, her voice shrill. "I feel like I have to manage everything in this house." The old me would have apologized, tried to smooth things over. The new me stood my ground. I looked at her calmly. "You seem really on edge lately, Sarah. Is everything okay?" My calm demeanor infuriated her more than yelling ever could have. It was gaslighting in reverse. I was the reasonable one, and she was the one who was inexplicably angry and paranoid. "I'm fine," she spat. "I'm just tired of having to do everything myself." It was a classic deflection, an attempt to create a problem where none existed to justify her actions. She needed me to be the villain. In an overheard call she made to her friend Chloe, a call I recorded, she presented her case. "He's just so clueless. He doesn't see me anymore. He just plods along day after day. Julian says I deserve to be with someone who celebrates my spirit." Hearing her discuss the dissolution of our marriage with the same casualness as choosing a restaurant was a fresh stab to the heart, but it also hardened my resolve. She wasn't a trapped woman lashing out. She was a woman building a new narrative, a narrative where she was the empowered heroine on a journey of self-discovery, and I was the boring, unfulfilling obstacle she had to overcome. Part 6: An Unexpected Ally. The game-changing twist didn't come from a digital footprint or a recording. It came from a human source, and it was the last person I ever would have expected: Sarah's younger sister, Emily. Emily was the opposite of Sarah in many ways. She was grounded, no nonsense, and had a built-in detector for phonies that was second to none. She and I had always gotten along well. I'd helped her with the down payment on her first house and had always treated her like the sister I never had. She called me one Thursday afternoon, asking to meet for a coffee, her voice strained. We met at a small cafe halfway between my office and her home. She looked terrible. Her eyes were red-rimmed and she twisted a napkin into shreds as she spoke. "Mark, I don't know how to say this," she began, her voice trembling. "I think I know Sarah is doing something incredibly stupid." I kept my face a mask of neutral concern. "What do you mean?" "She's been talking about this guy. This life coach." Emily rolled her eyes with such force I was surprised they stayed in her head. "She's been telling me things, how he understands her, how she feels alive with him. She's talking about leaving you." I let out a slow, deliberate breath. "She's having an affair." It wasn't a question. Emily nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I think so. She won't admit it, not in so many words, but it's obvious. And Mark, she's been moving money." That was new. "What money?" "From her and my mom's joint inheritance account. Mom left them both a substantial amount when she passed. Sarah's been making large withdrawals for the past few months, thousands of dollars at a time. She told me it was for a personal investment opportunity." Emily's voice dripped with scorn. "I'm guessing her investment is about 511 and has great abs." My mind raced, connecting the dots. The money wasn't just for hotel rooms and fancy dinners. This was something bigger. "His name is Julian Croft," I said flatly. Emily's head snapped up. "How did you know?" "I've known for a few weeks," I admitted. "I've been gathering proof." Relief and anger warred on her face. "So you're not going to just let her walk all over you?" "Good, because it gets worse." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "I looked him up, this Julian guy. He's not just a life coach, Mark. He's a con artist. There are articles online, forums. He preys on wealthy, unhappy women. He gets them to invest in his wellness retreats and empowerment seminars, which are basically just fronts. He drains their bank accounts and then disappears." A cold, terrifying clarity washed over me. Sarah wasn't just having an affair. She was being played by a professional predator. And she was about to throw away her future, her inheritance, and our entire life for him. My mission suddenly changed. This was no longer just about revenge for a broken heart. It was about protecting Sarah from her own catastrophic judgment, even if she hated me for it. It was about saving her from a mistake that would ruin her. "Our 20th anniversary is next Saturday," I said, a plan beginning to form in the strategic, logistical part of my brain. "I've already booked a private room at La Vigne." Emily's eyes widened as she recognized the name of the restaurant from the credit card statements I now shared with her. "What are you going to do?" I'm going to give her a night she'll never forget, I replied, a grim smile touching my lips for the first time in weeks. And I'm going to need your help. Part 7, The Architect of Chaos. With Emily as my ally, the next week was a masterclass in controlled chaos. The plan had two phases. Phase 1 was financial containment. Phase 2 was emotional detonation. First, the money. With Emily's help and a consultation with a shark of a divorce attorney she recommended, I took immediate, decisive action. We contacted the bank that held the joint inheritance account. With Emily as a co-beneficiary and with evidence of suspicious activity, we were able to get a temporary freeze put on the account, pending a review. Sarah's ATM card to her personal slush fund was now a useless piece of plastic. Next, I moved the majority of our joint savings and investment funds into a new account solely in my name. My lawyer assured me it was legally sound, a necessary step to protect marital assets from dissipation in light of impending divorce proceedings. In the space of 24 hours, I had financially firewalled 2 decades of our shared life. The well was dry. The next time Sarah went to fund her lover's wellness retreat, she would find her resources cut off. Phase 2 required more finesse. The confrontation needed to be a public execution, not a private argument. It needed witnesses and it needed to be on my terms. Our anniversary dinner at La Vigne, the very scene of her clandestine lunches, was the perfect stage. I became the model husband to be betrayed. I found a stunning diamond necklace I'd bought for her anniversary gift and left the open box on our bed for her to see. Her reaction was a mixture of guilt and pathetic gratitude. She probably thought it was a sign that her clueless husband was finally trying, making her decision to leave him all the more tragically noble in her mind. "Mark, it's beautiful," she'd whispered, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "You shouldn't have. It's our 20th anniversary, Sarah," I said, my voice thick with feigned emotion. "Nothing's too good for you." The irony was a delicious, bitter pill. I arranged for our son, Ethan, to come home from college that weekend, telling him it was a surprise for his mother. I also invited Emily and her husband, Ben, to join us for the dinner. And for the final, crucial piece of the puzzle, I hired a private investigator, a gruff ex-cop named Miller, for one specific task. I gave him Julian Croft's picture and the reservation time for our anniversary dinner. His instructions were simple. Make sure Julian showed up at the restaurant at precisely 9:00 p.m. I gave him a plausible story to lure him there. A potential new client, a wealthy heiress, wanted to meet him to discuss a life-changing investment. For a grifter like Julian, it would be irresistible bait. The night of the dinner, the air in the house was electric with tension, though only I knew why. Sarah looked stunning in a new black dress, probably bought for Julian, but I would be the one to see it. As I adjusted my tie in the mirror, I looked into my own eyes. The hurt was still there, a deep, primal wound, but it was surrounded by something new, a cold, hard certainty. I wasn't the victim in this story anymore. I was the director. And I was about to call action, Part 8, the anniversary dinner. La Vigne was exactly as I'd imagined, dimly lit, pretentious, and ridiculously expensive. The kind of place where people speak in whispers and judge you by the label on your wine bottle. Our private room was in the back, elegant and secluded. Ethan was there, looking handsome in a blazer, happy to be home. Emily and Ben arrived shortly after, Emily giving me a subtle, supportive nod. Sarah was radiant, playing the part of the happy wife to perfection. She laughed, she told stories, she held my hand across the table. Her performance was flawless. She spoke of our next 20 years, and I could see Ethan beaming, completely unaware of the charade. It was that sight, my son's innocent happiness, that solidified my resolve. He deserved to know the truth, but not in a way that would destroy him. He needed to see that his father was not a passive victim. We ordered champagne. I stood to make a toast. To Sarah, I began, my voice steady, my eyes locked on hers. My beautiful wife of 20 years of memories, of partnership, of trust. I let the word trust hang in the air for a beat too long. I saw a flicker of unease in her eyes. They say the secret to a long marriage is honesty and communication, and I've realized lately that we need to be more honest with each other. I reached into my jacket pocket. She smiled, expecting the necklace box. Instead, I pulled out a single, cheap, glittery earring and dropped it on the table between us. I believe this is yours, I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. Or perhaps it belongs to a friend. You must have dropped it in your car on the way to the Bear Mountain Spa. The color drained from her face. Her smile vanished, replaced by a mask of pure panic. Ethan looked confused. Dad, what's going on? Your mother has a few things she needs to explain, I said calmly, my gaze never leaving Sarah's. For example, how she enjoyed her girls' trip so much when her car's GPS shows she never left the city. She spent the entire weekend at the Argent, a lovely boutique hotel downtown. Isn't that right, Sarah? She stared at me, speechless, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. And these lunches, I continued, pulling out printed copies of the credit card statements and sliding them across the table. Right here at this very restaurant. You must love the food. You seem to come every week with a friend. A very special friend. Mark, stop, she whispered, her voice trembling. Not here, not in front of Ethan. Here is the only place for it, I said, my voice rising with controlled fury. This is where you brought him. This is the stage you chose. I turned to my son. Ethan, I'm sorry, your mother has been having an affair. Ethan recoiled as if he'd been slapped. Emily reached out to put a hand on his arm. Sarah finally broke. It's not what you think, she cried, tears streaming down her face. You don't understand, you were never here, you were always working. He sees me, he listens to me. Does he listen to your bank account too? I shot back. Does he see your inheritance? I tossed the frozen bank account statements onto the pile. You've given him over $50,000 in the last 4 months, Sarah, money your mother left for you. That's when Emily chimed in, her voice dripping with ice. He's a con artist, Sarah. We know everything. We know about the other women, the fake investments. He was playing you. Sarah looked from me to her sister, her entire world crumbling around her. And right at that moment, as if on cue, the door to our private room opened. My PI, Miller, had timed it perfectly. Standing in the doorway looking confused was Julian Croft. He was holding his phone, clearly expecting to meet a wealthy heiress. His eyes scanned the room, landing on Sarah, and for a second he looked as panicked as she did. Then his professional charm kicked in. I'm so sorry, I must have the wrong room, he said with a practiced, easy smile. No, Julian, I said, standing up. You're in exactly the right place. I'm Mark. Sarah's husband, I gestured to the empty chair at the table. We were just talking about you. Please join us. We have so much to authentically discuss. Julian's face went white. He looked at Sarah, then at me, and then at the pile of financial documents on the table. The grifter's brain behind his handsome face finally processed the scene. It was a trap. He turned without a word and practically fled from the restaurant. I turned back to my wife. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring at the empty doorway where her lover had just been. The look on her face wasn't one of heartbreak. It was the blank, hollow look of someone who had just realized she had bet everything on a lie and lost it all. The show was over. Part 9, The Aftermath in the Mirror. The silence that followed Julian's exit was heavier than anything I had ever experienced. It was the sound of a life imploding. Ethan was the first to move. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He looked at his mother, his face a mixture of pain and disgust, and then he looked at me. I'm going to get some air, he said, his voice choked. He walked out of the room without a backward glance at Sarah. Ben, ever the stoic supporter, followed him out, clapping a hand on his shoulder. Now it was just me, Sarah, and Emily. Sarah was still staring at the doorway, tears silently tracing paths through her makeup. She looked broken, pathetic. I expected to feel a surge of triumph, a cathartic release of my rage, but what I felt was a profound, aching emptiness. I had won. I had exposed the lies, cut off the money, and humiliated her and her lover. I had orchestrated the perfect revenge, but what had I really won? The smoldering ruins of a 20-year marriage. Emily was not so conflicted. Are you happy now, Sarah? She said, her voice cutting through the silence. Was he worth it? Was he worth blowing up your entire life for a man who ran the second things got real? Sarah finally turned her gaze from the door, her eyes finding mine. Mark, she whispered, the name a plea. I messed up. I know I did. We can fix this, please. A few weeks ago, those words might have reached a small, hopeful part of me. But that part was gone, burned away by the lies and the methodical planning of her takedown. I looked at her, the woman I had once loved more than life itself, and I saw a stranger. No, Sarah, I said, my voice devoid of heat, just a cold, flat finality. There is no we to fix. You didn't just mess up, you made 1,000 choices. You chose to lie every single day. You chose to disrespect me, our son, and the life we built. You chose to steal from your own mother's legacy to give to a con man. These aren't mistakes, this is who you are. I stood up and placed a folder on the table. These are the divorce papers. My lawyer will be in touch with yours. I'm being more than fair with the settlement, more than you deserve. But the house is mine. You have 1 week to pack your things. I walked out of the room, leaving her there with her sister and the wreckage of her own making. I found Ethan outside, pacing back and forth on the sidewalk. I put my arm around my son, my strong, grown-up son, who was now quietly weeping. It's going to be okay, I told him, though I wasn't entirely sure if I was trying to convince him or myself. We're going to be okay. In the weeks that followed, I existed in a state of grim efficiency. The divorce was surprisingly quick. Sarah, stripped of her financial leverage and emotionally shattered, put up no fight. She moved into a small apartment across town. I heard through Emily that Julian had vanished, his phone disconnected, his social media profiles deleted. He had moved on to his next mark. Sarah was left with nothing but the consequences of her choices. I didn't see her again until we had to sign the final papers. She looked older, diminished. The confident, radiant woman from the anniversary dinner was gone, replaced by someone tired and hollowed out. There was no anger left in me, just a deep, lingering sadness for what we had lost, for the people we used to be. We signed the documents in silence and walked away in opposite directions, two strangers who had once shared a life. Part 10, a different kind of sunrise. The first few months of my new life were defined by absence. The silence in the house was different now. It was no longer heavy with unspoken words, it was just empty. I rattled around the big suburban home that was once a symbol of my success but now felt like a mausoleum. I worked, I ate, I slept. I was functioning, but I wasn't living. The turning point came one Saturday morning. I was sitting in the kitchen, staring into a cup of coffee when my phone rang. It was Ethan. "Hey Dad," he said, his voice hesitant. "I was wondering, do you want to go for a hike up by Bear Mountain?" The irony was not lost on me. The sight of the fictional girl's trip. "Yeah, son," I said, a real smile touching my lips for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. "I'd like that very much." As we walked the trails, surrounded by the quiet majesty of the mountains, we talked, really talked. He asked me how I was doing, and for the first time I was completely honest. I told him about the anger, the sadness, and the confusing sense of emptiness that revenge had left behind. He, in turn, told me about his own anger and confusion. We didn't solve anything, not really, but we shared the burden. And in that sharing, it felt lighter. That hike was the beginning of my reconstruction. I realized that for 20 years my identity had been Mark, the husband, Mark, the provider. I had built a life for my family, but I had forgotten to build one for myself. I sold the house. It was too big, too full of ghosts. I bought a smaller place downtown, a condo with a great view of the city skyline I had helped to build. I started focusing on myself. I rejoined my old softball team. I took a cooking class, something I'd always wanted to do. I started traveling not to fancy resorts, but to places I'd always wanted to see. The Grand Canyon, the coast of Maine, the jazz clubs of New Orleans. I reconnected with old friends and made new ones. Slowly, painstakingly, I started building a new life, brick by brick, just as I had with my business. This structure, however, was all my own. The liberation was intoxicating. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. The ordeal hadn't just broken me, it had broken me open. I emerged from the wreckage not as a victim, but as the architect of my own second act. I don't know what happened to Sarah, not really. I hear bits and pieces from Emily. She's working a retail job, trying to put her life back together. I hold no ill will towards her anymore. The anger has faded, replaced by a kind of distant pity. She made her choices, and I made mine. My choice was to live. And as I watched the sunrise paint the sky from my new balcony, a cup of coffee in my hand and a sense of peace in my heart, I know with absolute certainty that I made the right one. If this story hit home, like and subscribe for more gripping tales of love and betrayal. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Would you forgive or seek revenge? Was Mark's response justified, or did he go too far? Your perspective matters. And don't forget to check out the next video popping up now for another twist-filled saga.